Bonjour tout le monde. Hello everyone. Welcome back to Montreal Expert. My name is Tom and today I'm trading in the sidewalks of the city for le Fleuve Saint-Laurent. This is the St. Lawrence River because I want to experience Montreal from a whole new perspective today. And so as we ride the river on a ferry, we will uncover stories hidden beneath these waters. And I want to go like way back. So stories from glaciers to Indigenous history and the city's founding and its wildlife and all these landmarks that have helped shape Montreal and make it what it is. So let's set sail. I do videos on social media and I call them the quickie tours, and I did one all about this ferry ride. Here it is. Hey, I want to give you a quickie tour of Montreal. I am at Le Vieux Port. You need to go down here to get to the ferries. Let's go ride a ferry. The ferries are operated by a company called Navarque. They offer a few different routes, and I recommend you book online in advance. And I love that you get up close views of la Ronde, and we go right under the pont Jacques Cartier. Du côté de l'île de Montréal, la vue, c'est pas mal juste le port de Montréal pendant tout le trajet, et ça nous rappelle à quel point le port est important et le port est immense. So I made it to Pointe-aux-Trembles. This is a part of Montreal that's as old Montreal. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that. There's a lot of history here dating back, European history dating back all the way to the 1600s. And of course, First Nations history dating back hundreds and thousands of years before that. This is the site where the French built a fort here in the 1670s. And today, it's a neighborhood of Montreal that has a direct connection by water, because of the ferries, with Le Vieux Montréal. Voila! I should have worn my little sailor's hat today. Then I would have been a proper seaman. Oh, we're about to hit the current. Look at that skyline behind me. It's really impressive. And, you know, the bridges that you'll see in a minute, the port, the islands, the parks, it's all impressive. But for a second, just imagine it all disappearing. No skyscrapers, no bridges, none of that. Just forests stretching out to the horizon and an enormous ribbon of fresh water flowing steadily towards the Atlantic Ocean. Now that is where Montreal's story begins. Long before Jacques Cartier sailed here in 1535, long before Samuel de Champlain founded Quebec City, a little downriver. I like this. I feel like I'm on vacation. Long before there was even a country called Canada, for thousands of years, Indigenous peoples navigated these waters with extraordinary skill. The Ganyangahaga, the Anishinaabeg, the Wendat, and many other nations understood something that Europeans would only discover later. The St. Lawrence wasn't an obstacle. It was the way around. It was the connection. It was life. It literally connected communities, hundreds, sometimes thousands of kilometers apart from each other. Trade moved along these waters. Knowledge and thought and families and cultures met here. Le fleuve, c'était la vie. Le fleuve, c'est encore la vie. And this river was like a highway. And when the French settlers eventually arrived, they quickly realized the exact same thing. And if you want Montreal to survive, you best build it next to the river. That bridge there is the pont Jacques Cartier. Inauguré en 1930, le pont reliait et relie encore aujourd'hui Montréal avec sa rive sud. Millions of people cross it every year, and probably without giving it much thought. But you know, from the river, you can really appreciate how elegant it is. That roller coaster that you see, that's at La Ronde. And whether you've screamed your way down on that roller coaster, which is called the Goliath, or watched the international fireworks competition, which they launched from there, or simply eaten too much junk food and then like thrown up or felt sick on a ride, it's amazing because to me, amusement parks are like time machines. Not only do they feel like they're a little bit stuck in the past, but at the same time, it's like your own personal time machine because you might not remember every ride you went on, but you do have memories. Anyone who's been to an amusement park has memories from amusement parks. La Ronde is found on Île Sainte-Hélène, and right behind it is Île Notre-Dame. Part of Île Sainte-Hélène was natural, but the rest of it was enhanced, and Notre-Dame is completely artificially created. And they made these for Expo 67, which is kind of like when Montreal introduced itself to the world. A lot of people still think of it as Montreal's peak, and I understand why. You know, this river is the reason why Ville-Marie, the tiny little settlement that would eventually turn into Montreal, was founded here exactly where it was in 1642. It wasn't random, it was strategic. The island sits at a meeting point of inland trade routes, surrounded by fertile land, protected by Mount Royal, and blessed with direct access to one of North America's greatest waterways. Everything was the river, and the river was everything. The current here has its own personality and even its own name. We call it Le Courant Sainte-Marie. It's shaped by the immense volume of water leaving the Great Lakes by changing depths, underwater ridges, islands, seasonal flows, and even the tides that eventually influenced the lower St. Lawrence closer to the Atlantic. Navigators have to respect this river because it demands respect. The current could help you, or it could very quickly remind you who's in charge. And despite being one of Canada's busiest waterways, this river is also incredibly alive. Even though you only see the surface, beneath it is a whole other world. There are more than 80 species of fish that live here. Fish like ancient sturgeon that glide slowly along the bottom of the river that look almost exactly the way they did back in dinosaur times. You'll find northern pike hiding among the underwater vegetation, waiting to ambush their prey. Walleye, yellow perch, bass, catfish. It's an ecosystem that's far richer than most people imagine. And on the shoreline, you'll find great blue herons, muskrats, turtles, and beavers. And they're all part of this enormous living network. And every spring and fall, the river becomes a migration corridor for countless birds traveling thousands of kilometers. Sometimes I forget that Montreal isn't just a city, it's also a habitat. This water tells a whole story. It begins as water flowing out of the Great Lakes, carrying minerals, nutrients, and sediments gathered along an incredible journey. By the time it reaches the Gulf of the St. Lawrence, a little past Quebec City, it will begin mixing with salt water from the Atlantic Ocean. Every drop beneath this ferry is on its own voyage, and some of it may have fallen as snow hundreds of kilometers away. Some of it may have passed through Lake Superior years ago, and tomorrow it'll be somewhere else entirely. There's something strangely comforting about that. This river is always moving, yet somehow it's still just here. For much of this ride, if you look on the side of the island of Montreal, what you'll see is the port. And without this port, there probably wouldn't be a Montreal. For generations, ships arrived carrying immigrants searching for a new life. Cargo filled with timber, grain, machinery, textiles. It all communicated here from Montreal to the world and from the world to Montreal. Businesses grew, factories opened, neighborhoods were built because of this port. Railways were built to connect this port with other ports and with other parts of Canada. Entire industries were born because ships could reach the island of Montreal. Even today, the Port of Montreal links us to the rest of the globe. You want to know something wild? Glaciers used to cover this land. About 20,000 years ago, there was an ice sheet that was more than a kilometer thick, covering everything you see here. Imagine if you were standing downtown in Montreal today and you looked up, and instead of seeing skyscrapers, you saw a wall of bluish, whitish ice towering over you. And it was even taller than the skyscrapers are today. That glacier, it slowly made its way through, carving valleys. It polished the bedrock, and it reshaped the entire region. When it finally retreated, something crazy happened. The land was pushed so low under the weight of the glacier that seawater started to flood inland. And for thousands of years, Montreal sat beneath what geologists today call the Champlain Sea. Imagine whales once swam where today you're stuck in traffic on a rush hour on a Wednesday. That's one of my favorite Montreal facts, and it's completely true, even though it sounds ridiculous. And as the land slowly rebounded, the sea disappeared, leaving behind it the rivers and the lakes that we have today. It also left behind fertile clay soils that would eventually feed our farms, our villages, and was able to sustain a population of a growing city. In many ways, Montreal is a gift left behind by a glacier. You know, I never get tired of this river. Every time I look at the St. Lawrence, I don't just see water. I see a timeline. I see history. I see the glaciers. I see Indigenous canoes, French explorers, les voyageurs, merchant ships, steamships, Expo, the metro, and all the people, millions of them, who've looked out over the same river and wondered what might be waiting around the next bend. Le fleuve, c'est Montréal, et Montréal, c'est le fleuve. Le fleuve peut exister sans Montréal, mais Montréal ne peut pas exister sans son fleuve. Our destination today is Pointe-aux-Trembles, and a lot of people, even the locals, don't make it out here, and quite honestly, they're missing out on something special. Founded in the 1670s, Pointe-aux-Trembles is one of Montreal's oldest surviving settlements. And even though the city expanded mostly westward, with the taller buildings and higher density and busier streets to the west, this community somehow managed to hold on to its slower rhythm. If you walk through the old village today, you kind of feel the history. There's these old stone houses that have stood for centuries, and churches that watched generations come and go. It's the kind of place where you feel the history, but it doesn't feel like a museum. It just feels lived in. All right, and now we're in Pointe-aux-Trembles, pretty much right at the tip of the island of Montreal. So whether you're a local or you're a visitor to Montreal, let me give you a word of advice. Pay more attention to the river and try to get out on it as often as you can. Take the ferry, slow down. Leave the streets behind for a little while, because sometimes the best way to understand a city, especially a city on a river, is to let the river tell you its story. And Montreal would not be here if it wasn't for le Fleuve Saint-Laurent. Voilà,